you don't make these kind of moves because the Supreme Court is obviously ideologically captured, right? This is, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, but the way I see this is like, this is the kind of initiative you take only when you suspect that your movement is never going to lose power, which I think is ominous. Let's get started with the fucking Supreme Court. So for those of you who don't know, the Trump administration had a sequence of insane executive orders. Most of them are unconstitutional. And one of those executive orders was to revoke birthright citizenship. Now, obviously, this is completely unconstitutional. And they knew that it was completely unconstitutional, but they did it anyway. And what they ended up doing after getting an injunction from a lower court, from a court in, I forget which state, they had to put a pause on it, right? The case escalated all the way up to the Supreme Court, but there was one unique predicament in this. The Supreme Court decision was not around whether or not it was constitutional to, by executive mandate, revoke birthright citizenship. The Supreme Court decision was not even around whether or not birthright citizenship is constitutional or not, right? That wasn't what it was about. The Supreme Court decision revolved around another thing. How much power do state courts have in terms of stopping federal level decisions being made by the executive? And the Supreme Court decided they shouldn't have that much power at all. Here it is.
Court has just released a potential landmark decision impacting the future of birthright citizenship in the U.S. The justices were asked to roll back nationwide injunctions against the president's attempt to redefine the 14th Amendment, which states that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a U.S. citizen, regardless of their parents' citizenship status. It's been in place for more than 150 years. But now, in a 6-3 split, the conservative majority ruled that President Trump can move forward with implementing his birthright citizenship change, except for those who brought the case, the 22 states and a group of pregnant immigrant women who brought that case. So it's not directly getting at the 14th Amendment here, but this will have a nationwide impact. Let's go ahead and bring in our Devin Dwyer, ABC's senior Washington reporter, who's been following the Supreme Court on this. Devin, it's not as straightforward as I think a lot of people were perhaps expecting or hoping to hear. So break down what this actually means.
Well, this was a big surprise, Whit, and this is coming from the youngest conservative justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, 6-3.
What's interesting about this decision is that you don't make these kind of moves because the Supreme Court is obviously ideologically captured, right? And they work in a partisan manner. They sometimes decide against the Trump administration, but I think all of those decisions come down to upholding the legitimacy of the court to a certain degree, while simultaneously making important decisions like this one that will be truly beneficial to the Trump project overall. This is, maybe I'm misunderstanding this. Like, I'm not I'm not exactly a constitutional law scholar. I actually have a unique theory. I think it's all bullshit. But the way I see this is like, this is the kind of initiative you take only when you suspect that your movement is never going to lose power, which I think is ominous. I think this is the kind of moves that you make when you don't think that the opposition party will ever come into power, or at least you're operating on the knowledge that the opposition party is simply a controlled opposition party, and therefore they will never take advantage of this. What do I mean by this? Because going forward, let's say in the future where we still do have democracy, in a hypothetical tomorrow, elections take place, Democrats win, and the Democratic Party that wins is actually resembling, I don't know, like a Zoran, AOC, Bernie, like a fighting Democrat Party that wants to take decisions at the federal level, behave like Donald Trump, right? But this time, instead of doing it at the behest of the corporate oligarchy, they do it at the behest of the citizenry, at the behest of the working poor, for example. The lower courts would not be able to issue injunctions against those federal decisions at that point, which, again, dangerous prospect for a party that might lose their grip on power. Not so dangerous if that party does not feel like they will ever lose their grip on power, or recognize that even if they were to lose their grip on power, they simply don't believe that the Democrats would ever take advantage of this. Because as David Dan points out, sounds like the nationwide injunctions on non-compete agreements, student debt relief, the COVID vaccine mandate, and much more are all lifted now. Or wait, is this only that nationwide injunctions aren't allowable for Republican policies? Also notable, Kavanaugh's view that today's decision apparently does not apply to agency challenges, and in cases under the Administrative Procedure Act, plaintiffs may ask a court to preliminarily set aside a new agency rule. Like, you don't take away one of these powers unless you think the Democrats are never going to use it, or the Democrats are never going to be in power to begin with. Which also, of course, reminds me of this fantastic moment where Trump told Christians at a meeting that they won't have to vote again after this one election. He was just like, just vote for me one last time, and then y'all are good. Y'all are good forever. Just as one time. And then you're good.
As you said, in a big win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one, changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Practically speaking, it means the president can, in the next 30 days, begin to develop guidelines for how he would implement that. It does not mean, however, Whit, that this executive order is free from future legal challenge. Legal cases in 3 different districts will continue on the merits. The Supreme Court, in oral argument in this matter, did signal that it was skeptical that it could stand up to legal muster. But at this point, the court is really weighing in on the ability of individual judges in districts around the country to block a president's action nationwide.
What the fuck is the point of the union if every federal law is up to the states? I mean, in a weird way, this simultaneously takes away power from lower courts, so it takes away state power, but it also, in the future, could take away federal power depending on who or depending on what the decision is. Because, like, now you can't have lower courts make injunctions that pertain to nationwide issues. Like, you can't have you can't have a lower court stop the executive order or the things that may come from an executive order, unless it's like up to an individual, I guess, unless it's directly impacting an individual. But in the inverse, it simultaneously gives more power to the executive office if there is ever a Democrat in charge, and then they are basically now this unstoppable force. Do you see what I mean? Which is why I said it seems strange to do this unless you personally think you will either A, never worry about the Democrats taking advantage of this, or B, never have to worry about Democrats winning an election ever again. Ryan Grimm says this Supreme Court birthright ruling is more chaos for Social Security to handle. Now when a baby is born, depending on where it's born, the process for getting Social Security number won't be simple and automatic. Nightmare of chaos for new parents will follow. It purports to remove forum shopping in trying to get nationwide injunctions, but allows each district to interpret the Constitution in their own way, which in turn will create undue chaos and burden on the system, breaking it whole. I don't know what happens to the federal government here. I don't know what happens to the lower court system here. Do they just preside over their individual districts? So America is a nation divided of just whatever the jurisdiction, the judicial jurisdiction is, where you just have this weird balkanization of courts, where in some places you're under a totally different banner and a totally different set of rules, whereas in other federal court districts you have a totally different set of rules. Like it goes even beyond like states. I don't know. Nationwide injunctions have been a seminal tool for the Federalist Society to legislate the conservative agenda for decades because they know the Republican cannot maintain popularity indefinitely. The fact that they are willing to do away with this power signals they are moving into a new phase of the master plan in which they are beyond worrying about insurances against electoral uncertainty. That is why I'm saying this is a terrifying decision.